Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to the Applied Communication class, and I will now explain about broadcasting provision. As you may know, broadcasting is about television and radio. But actually, what do you really know about this provision? I think that several of you have different opinions or perspective about this one. But I believe most of you maybe know the communication studies because you know about this profession. For example, anchor, announcer, or reporter. So when you're looking into this picture, what is actually in your mind? I bet that some of you thought that they are look very cool. They are famous person, very fashionable because of the clothes and the trend that they always talk about. It's about money because they are famous. They actually got a lot of money. They look very smart because they mention all over the news and the theory and etc. And last, you may think that this work environment is very fun. I would almost all that true, but have you ever imagined that they work in the broadcasting industry are not alone? There are a lot of people behind their back to make this program or news or even works. But actually, we have to remember that the digital communication nowadays have the impact on the broadcasting industry. Traditional broadcast media business actually have to compete not only with other broadcast media but on other businesses and platforms. For example, previously, some televisions such as TVRI, RCTI, or Indosiar maybe have to compete with each other. But nowadays, they have to compete with other platforms. They have to understand and compete with the trends in YouTube. They have to compete with social media information or maybe Facebook. Actually, there are also shifting of interest and meaning of audience entertainment nowadays. People interest of entertainment usually has just fulfilled by television, news, or program. But now, people can get entertainment from everywhere. They can just open their TV cable to watch a movie. They can go or surf in social media or Facebook to watch videos or some short movie, something like that. So it's very easy. When previously people or audience enjoying broadcast media content used terrestrial television shows which is free to air, but there are surely changes in SES or socioeconomic status of terrestrial television viewers. Usually the television viewers has lower SES or socioeconomic status. But now uh, people who have higher SES from A to B usually prefer to go on YouTube or cable TV, while SES C or D use television because it is free to air. Further, broadcast media content has become easier to create and can be done not only by professionals. You student can create your own content. There are a lot of vlogger, YouTuber, celebgram, even little kids can create their own content. So the competition is everywhere actually. And last, the boundaries of broadcast media quality are getting blurry. If before digital communication, people will only trust to broadcast media to get information or news, but now when the there's something happen like for accident on the road happen, you can get the direct video or information in the Twitter, in Facebook, or even WhatsApp group. It's very easy. So the fastest the news, people will get more attracted to the news itself. And sometimes some people, and actually majority of people, trust information from word of mouth, which are from actually from their families, their friends, and peer group, than from the broadcast media. So it's getting very challenging for the media nowadays. Later on, post-broadcasting era will influence the digital technology and media convergence, especially in the management of media industry. Some position has been replaced by the technology. Further, market and business structure are changing because of the condition. Audiovisual content is no longer exclusive to certain media platform. It can be used in several platforms or media and it can be reused. It's very easy because once your content or video or audio is uploaded, it can be used by anyone. It's very easy to be edited, to put back on the other format and then to re-upload again. So it's no longer exclusive. Lastly, media management with a 360 approach that forces media to be multi-platform. For example, Compass, a big media company who owns Compass TV, Compass.com, Compass newspaper, and other aspects that they have as a multi-platform to be able to compete in the industry era of post broadcasting. But now, first, I want you all to check out this video about the fake news and what is the correlation with the broadcasting industry. Check it out.
There's nothing new about fake news.
I used to see in the supermarkets the Weekly World News. It was full of fake news stories. They were famous for this ongoing saga about the Bat Boy.
It's not even new for Hillary Clinton.
There was another story in which Hillary Clinton was supposed to have found an alien baby and adopted him. So, this kind of thing as an editorial strategy has always been around, but there wasn't a lot of money in it and there wasn't much incentive to produce it.
Because the big money was in advertising.
If you're trying to make people think, this expensive watch, these kind of clothes will make you seem like a savvy, cool person, advertising in a fake news publication, it doesn't meet any of those objectives.
What is new are the incentives of the internet.
A lot of advertisement these days is served by remote computer algorithms, and they know who you are because they've been tracking your web browsing, but they don't care what site you're on.
And within Facebook, it can be hard to tell where a story is coming from.
And the way that's presented, you don't have a strong sense of what is the brand and what is their reputation.
So fake news can zoom around Facebook faster than anything before. It can make money, and people might not know if it's coming from a credible source. And fake news was definitely rampant during the 2016 presidential election. One BuzzFeed News report found that the top fake news articles on Facebook were either pro-Trump or anti-Hillary, which makes fake news a convenient target for liberals who are upset about the election results.
And also a lot of people in journalism see the world taking a disturbing turn, and they would like to believe that fake news is the reason.
While established media outlets are brands built on accuracy, rogue websites, some masquerading as legitimate, are reporting misinformation.
But when you look at it, as best we can tell, the kinds of things that really hurt Hillary Clinton in the campaign were true stories.
Gallup asked voters what they'd read, seen, or heard about Hillary Clinton, and they found that stories about Clinton's email dominated throughout the campaign.
Network television news devoted more minutes of total airtime to covering Hillary Clinton's email server than to all policy issues combined. And it wasn't even close.
Clinton violated security guidelines when she used a private email server.
The Hillary Clinton camp back under the cloud of the email controversy.
Thousands of emails under the microscope.
Clinton's email scandal is back in the spotlight.
I think a big problem you see is that the way media outlets like to think about a campaign is, well, you have two candidates out there, you have a team of reporters, so you divide up your team. Reporters are smart, they want to be adversarial. So the upshot is that you naturally end up with the result that both candidates are pretty similar. because you have similar numbers of people writing similar numbers of investigative stories about both of them. So if it turns out that there's sort of two big knocks on Hillary Clinton, her emails and her foundation, you get a lot of stories about each of those subjects. And if it turns out that there's a million knocks against Donald Trump, each story winds up getting less coverage because you only have a certain amount of Donald Trump space.
This is called false equivalence, and you can see some evidence of this in the Gallup data. Emails consistently are at the top for Clinton, with Trump stories shifting around. Facebook is finally beginning to fight back by partnering with proven fact-checking organizations, but don't expect this to fix everything.
If you think the media did a bad job, which I do, I think that the bad job that was done was it was a lack of perspective.
Many voters are making a lesser of two evils assessment right now.
You have two flawed candidates this year. Which one can you tolerate the most?
Scandals surround both campaigns.
Both candidates are facing serious trust issues.
Real news, very mainstream outlets, did not present the stakes well. I think that means that a lot of people went into this election not really understanding what was at stake.
After you check out on that video, you may have a little bit concern about the content, especially not only in the television but also in the social media because the information is kind of blurry. Now, when we see the content development model, we can see that there are actually a lot of content that we usually enjoy. For example, we have a movie, apps or games, web series, television program, creative space, event, book, and merchandise. And all of them actually are in the same content environment. And sometimes they will exchange their content to each other because it's easily to replicate and to be integrated. Actually, this ecosystem is very good if you use it wisely, but sometimes it's not ideal if you plagiate the others' content without permission and use it for all your own good. So actually, it's a little bit tricky. However, you have to make sure that your content is solely yours and not using others' content without permission. Actually, we all understand that content is the king. So the content creators nowadays actually have a lot of opportunity to be famous and to get money, of course. For example, we know PewDiePie from YouTube who got millions dollars from YouTube content, and also he got the diamond button nowadays. And Indonesia, maybe you are familiar with Atta Halilintar who created YouTube, but also we have another influencers or content creator who get very famous because of social media. But actually, we talk about content. The content itself can be put in social media, but it also can be put in broadcasting. So the environment or the industry right now is not about broadcasting, it's not about news, but it's also about content because mainly people enjoy or consume the content. Actually, if you choose to be content creator, it's a very good opportunity for you because you can work in many platforms. Depend which platform that you choose, and actually you have many options to monetize your creative products in the end. Actually, in the past, content creators belonged to broadcast media companies as the only parties who could afford to buy content. But nowadays, the number of buyers is increasing. So the buyers not only from the broadcast media company, but also many content company or production are willing to buy your content product. And then we also know that the creative industry of broadcasting is become more extensive and independent. They have actually a lot of money to buy your content because buying your content means many, if your content is good, means many people will watch your content and they will like, love, share, and etc. Means money because there will be another chance to get advertised or paid ads uh, on your content production. So actually, I want to you to check out the video about the impact of social media in broadcasting.
There has been a significant shift in the media climate from analog to digital, but social media is now also helping to shape media in the present day. Guyana's telecommunications minister addressed those challenges and its impact today, where she urged officials and the media to use them at the region's advantage. Cleopatra Murphy has this story.
While broadcasting relies on content, Guyana's Minister of Public Telecommunications, the Honorable Kathy Hughes, says what qualifies as content in 2017 completely differs from days before. She says it now encompasses an amalgamation of voice, video, and data delivered regardless of time, space, or distance, and it is delivered through many computers consumers can access in the palm of their hands.
Content is no longer exclusively delivered over the air or even through cable networks. Content is increasingly delivered online, facilitated by quantum increases in bandwidth and high mobile penetration rates. And even in Guyana, with our vastness of size, mobile penetration rates are approaching 80%, providing a convenient channel for content providers.
She says the old structured features of broadcast are now in the past as consumers have become producers through social media. Hughes says people have changed how they access news and are now relying on social media, amateur journalists, and their network of friends.
Using Guyana as an example, all major newspapers now have online editions. Many broadcasters also use social media in addition to dedicated online facilities. And there are emerging small online-only media offerings.
Hughes says the changing digital climate has led to outsourcing of media with digital content, redeployment of jobs, and there is now the expectation that everything should be aired live. Still, she says the Caribbean can take advantage of the shift.
It is for the institutions like the CBU to critically assess where the industry is going, and to help us in the region to chart a course towards reaping the economic benefits of our creativity.
The minister says while technology drives content, at the end of the day, content is the most important component and getting the story right should always be the priority. Cleopatra Murphy, ZNS Network News.
Okay, so now after you see what are really happening right now after the social media come into the industry, it is actually change the nature of broadcasting industry and shape different structure or management in the broadcasting editorial division especially. Now we will learn about the news production structures. It is actually a very compact when we compare to the previous structure before the digital technology. Now, actually, it's almost the same for the position of editor-in-chief because every news production will need an editor-in-chief with the vice editor, of course. And for the production of the content, it will be split into two blocks. The first one, maybe you all know about the news gathering. News gathering means there will be a producer who maintain or manage the field coordinator, including reporter and cameraman, and also there will be a region coordinator who check every what we call it contribution from each region because sometimes the event happens in Jogja, sometimes in Ntb, sometimes in Bali or Borneo. So it needs a coordinator in each region. In the production, actually, it will be split into two main job. For the first one is the executive producer will maintain about the will maintain the producer in the news gathering, about the contributor, and also about the news from the international region. If the news or the broadcasting company didn't have an international reporter or journalist outside, they will work with some bigger organization or institutions such as uh, Reuters or European journalism, or in Indonesia we call it Antara, who will contribute to news internationally, and so on and so on. And in the production aspect, we have to make sure that the event or the show works well as planned. Of course, we will have the program director, and under him there will be an audio person, lighting man, editor, graphics, switcherman, and also maybe you are know the anchor of the news, because she or he usually will be in front of the camera. And actually, what is their main job? Editor in chief will supervise the team, of course, and deputy editor in chief or vice editor will assigning a reporter, supervising newsroom operation, reports, and etc. Producer will fully responsible for the success of entire program, assisting with editing, knowing new trends. Actually, producer is the head of the program. So when the program is good, usually the producer have put more effort to knowing the trends, and also he or she will propose the coverage material, and also check whether it needs to be edited or so on. In the field, of course, this is the important person who will gathering the news and making or checking the news outside, collecting live news from the scenes, and also there are some contributors and correspondents who will have to fulfill the content in the news. Cameraman, of course, his job or her job is taking pictures in the field and studio with camera. It's like it's so obviously. In the production, there will be an executive producer who will lead the projection or planning meetings, develop news, and ensure visual materials. Program producer will responsible of the success of the program, determining the news to be broadcasted, and then proposing news projection. There will be also external broadcast and also international desks who will work in coordination with APTN, Associated Press Television Network, internationally to obtain foreign news, and also he or she will edit the foreign news itself. And lastly, we have program director who will work and coordinates the crew in master control during broadcasting and make sure everything runs smoothly, adjust camera composition, controls the news playlist that will appear. Editor works is editing, graphics will doing graphic works, audio man controls and correct the sound during the broadcasting, lighting man, switchman, and of course, presenter or anchor who will present the news on the television. Oh, it's a very interesting to work with such a lot of people, and you are the one who presents. So actually, everything that you read in front of you is not made by only the presenter or anchor, but many people works behind him or her. So it's many people job actually. And now it's about radio. When you hear about television, it's kind of like and sounds like very big. Many people works in the field, many people gathering the news, and then you will present the news. But how about radio? Actually, it's smaller. When I say smaller, it doesn't mean it has less meaning than the broadcasting industry. Radio itself is very entertaining, even though there may be slightly changed after we have podcast, but actually the concept is almost the same. However, during the radio program, you can have an interactive chat through WhatsApp, for example, or SMS or phone, and also they can have advertorial as well. So I think radio is still on, even though there is the podcast platform nowadays. In the radio structure, there will be a station manager, program director, and the program director will work beyond this, some people such as producer, editor, reporter, copywriter, and anchor. The reporter is still the same like in the broadcasting industry. He or she will get the news, compile the news, and etc. Copywriter will write actually it's not about the ads but also about the programming content, and the anchor who will present it or announcer will present it to you guys during the live or not live program. So it's quite compact, quite smaller than the broadcasting industry. So this is the main job. For example, station manager responsible for overall editorial operation, and they also supervise and direct editorial operations, while the program director will be responsible for the success of the program. Actually, radio has a lot of program, therefore, program director is the head of the program. Producer will work on specific program, designing and evaluating, reporter doing the news coverage, announcer with the news, communicates with listener, and maybe sometimes hosting an events because we know that many announcers also working on events delivers the information of the event schedule and entertain the audience at the same time. And the last one is copywriter to create an ad script for radio. And after all, after we know about the broadcasting industry and the disruption era and the radio, we now come to the concept of the disruption era, the challenge that faced by the broadcasting, radio, and news at the same time. So I will now play two videos. The first one is about the challenge of media industry, and the second one actually is the video of the death of the television. And I really want to know your opinion later on.
When I moved out of my childhood home and into a somewhat underwhelming apartment, I had a big question to ask myself. How will I watch television? In my previous domain, I had access to hundreds of channels, any episode of King of the Hill I desired, recorded on my DVR for future consumption. But now, the king was gone, and I had to decide whether signing up for satellite TV again would be worth it. It wasn't. So I signed up for Hulu and Netflix and never looked back. That's how it usually goes nowadays. The people that are moving out for the first time don't really see a need for traditional TV packages. In a few decades, satellite and cable television will be antiquated things of the past. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't appreciate how we got here, since the dynamic between streaming services, traditional television, and content creation sites like YouTube and Twitch are undeniably linked. Let's look at the history of television. This magical technology has been around for a century in some form, but the early days were rough. Radio was revolutionary, and the next step seemed to be to bring the movie theater experience home. But it would take a lot of invention and innovation to get to a point where the general public would say, "Oh, I get it." Normally I'd cover the in-depth technical history of this television, but honestly, it's not too integral to the video as a whole. I mean, much of this early tech is obsolete and evolved pretty quickly. So to make it short and sweet, several inventors wanted to find a way to transmit video along with audio, and there were a few ways to do this. One way, which actually gained some traction, was a mechanical television. Lights would be beamed through spinning discs, and as you can imagine, it didn't look great. Low-detailed silhouettes shine through an archaic-looking box. It was a challenge to even see what was happening on screen. Obviously, the public didn't see much use for something like this. After all, it looked like garbage. But it was early days, and no real standard for something like video transmissions existed. Other developments saw what we would consider now more practical technologies. Cathode rays and tubes, technical stuff, again, I won't get into. But this cool stuff made it so that by the 1930s you could have a TV in your house. It was over $10,000, sure, but again, you gotta start somewhere. Now, TV only really works if you have something to show on the screen, so in 1932 the BBC began having regular broadcasts, albeit with incredibly poor picture quality. Not just low resolution, it was like 30 lines that were displayed vertically. For comparison, a standard 1080p image has, well, 1080 vertical lines. This was 30p resolution. Boy, do we have it good today. Luckily for all of us, it got better over the next few years, but the tech was still rather niche. It was seen as a novelty device for the rich, and most of the general public were very much content with the radio. The growth TV was seeing was small, and things weren't looking much better when the war started. The BBC was worried that frequencies used for broadcasts could give away key positions to the enemy, or something like that. So they stopped programming once war broke out. Television was niche, but not unheard of to the masses. Tech demos showed it off at fairs and shows, but it was pretty uninteresting to most. They saw it as something pretty pointless for the price, and few could see a future where the general public would want such a thing. This is a widespread mentality with most technologies, to be honest. I remember when I was in school and my teacher wrote off the announcement of the iPhone with a simple, "Who would ever buy that?" Yeah, in early days of any tech, this sort of discourse occurs. But things do change. By the 1940s, TV stations were popping up in the States. It started with very limited tests to specific local areas at first, but the scale of broadcasts quickly grew. Content on all stations wasn't really what we expect today. Most shows were just classical music and brief news reports. With the war still in swing, investment in entertainment wasn't a priority. It was obvious that the true advent of television would have to wait its turn. But of course, the war ended. The economy would recover from the Great Depression, and with soldiers returning from battle, broadcasters would be willing to invest more in entertainment. This was very apparent in 1947, when the World Series was broadcast with a multiple camera setup. Average Joes would gather at the pubs and the streets just to catch a glimpse of the game. And how? The way the cameras would cut to the action arguably gave those watching television a better view than those who actually went to the game. And the general public began to warm up to the glowing light of television. The infrastructure to broadcast new, enthralling content was growing as well. It was unfeasible for a network to operate a station in every city across the US. So instead, an independent party would start a station and agree contractually to abide by one of the big network's rules. The affiliate gets content to show, and the network has a wider audience. As with any media device, as more people buy it, the excitement from content creators grows, as does the quality. The late 1940s and 50s would see the kinds of TV broadcasts vary in a much greater degree than the decade prior. Now you could see game shows, cooking shows, kid shows, and of course, sitcoms. TVs were getting cheaper, and the sales numbers reacted accordingly. From this span of the late 40s to 50s, the sales of TVs went from 1 million to over 40 million. It quickly went from a niche to necessity in the span of a decade. Before the 50s, all broadcasts were in black and white, but that wasn't much of an issue for most people. It was just the way things were. Color TV was first broadcast in 1951, but it didn't mean everybody had access to it. Sets offering the technology were incredibly expensive, and very few programs took advantage of the tech. It wasn't until 1954 that any primetime show was broadcast in color in the US. But over time, the tech got cheaper, and by the 70s, very few stations at all were broadcasting black and white content. Well, in the US. It really varies based on country, and some didn't even receive color TV transmissions until the 80s. But that's enough of that. Let's return to the 50s, where most TVs were still, well, this. By this point, TV was seen much as people would say, see video games today. It was popular, but purely for enjoyment. More serious content, like the news, was not seen as on the same level as the radio or the papers. News broadcasts would be short, at about 15 minutes long. mostly just the basic day-to-day happenings and whatnot. It wasn't captivating the nation quite like other news mediums, but that was to change. Over time, the public would gather around and see pretty big events on their old TV. Political debates, Senate hearings here in the States, and of course the moon landing. Over the course of the 60s, TV became cemented as something not just for entertainment, but the easiest way to distribute information to the general public. By the 70s, nightly news was incredibly popular and considered must-see TV. But the quality of other television programs was increasing as well. Now shows were dealing with more serious topics and more fleshed-out storylines. Watching TV at night became the standard for nightly activities. You had hours of shows and comedies that viewers couldn't get enough of. In some ways, it was hard to see how it could get better, but it did. The mid-70s brought about a new level of technological innovation in television. While in the past you could only watch specific shows and movies when the networks wanted to show you them, there were developments that would allow people to watch whatever they wanted when they wanted. Kind of. New home video storage formats, such as Laserdisc, Betamax, and of course VHS, were hitting the market. Now some formats predated these three, but these were the three that really had the most promise, and they took off. VHS and Betamax would allow you to record television broadcasts and watch them at a later date. Laserdisc, on the other hand, allowed you to purchase movies and watch them whenever you wanted. All of these formats had significant followings in their heyday. The ability to record TV and rewatch it later meant that you didn't have to rush home to make sure you saw that next episode of Taxi. And obviously, being able to watch the movies you wanted to, when you wanted to, shifted the dynamic between film and television. Now, at first, movie studios were scared of these new formats. Would people still go and see movies at theaters if they could watch them later at home? Would this destroy the film industry with this new level of convenience? These fears meant that early progress was slow, so at first only a few studios offered to put films on the formats. By the time studios warmed up to the new format, they priced films at exorbitant prices, like $80. Now, most people didn't want to spend $80 on a film, especially in 1980s dollars. But the desire to access these films at home was momentous, and demand for this product captivated the entrepreneur in all of us. This is where we would see rental stores pop up. You could rent a movie for a few nights instead of dropping $80 flat, and over the course of a few rentals, the stores would make their money back. This opened up a whole new era of television, where consumers began to seek out the easiest ways to access the content they wanted, the moment they wanted. A trend that would define the products and services that we see succeed to this day. People had options of what to watch, and this change would not be reversed. On another note, content that was broadcast over the air for the past few decades was held to pretty strict censorship standards. There is quite a lot of odd rules and regulations, and something as simple as a woman being pregnant in a show was deemed risque early on in television's life. But by the 80s, the grip of these rules were loosening, and more content could push the line. Think about The Simpsons. When it first aired, it was considered wildly controversial. Of course, now it seems very tame by comparison, but things were very different back then. And content that pushed the line was very popular. Stuff that didn't gravitate towards the norm. And nothing catered to this better than the arrival of cable and satellite TV. With these services, you would have more than just a few select channels. You would have hundreds of channels. Pay-per-view like HBO, channels for specific interests like MTV, Nick, Disney, you get the point. And all of this could be recorded on your VHS. Over time, the price of video cassettes dropped. You could go to a store and buy both films and blank tapes without emptying your wallet. And this was a big shakeup to the major networks. For the first time, they had sizable competition coming from both cable and VHS. Even with so many options out there, the mass public still tuned in. It seemed like the industry of television had stabilized. Everything had its place, new advancements gave consumers options, but enough of the consumer base was still watching TV in the same old way they always had. Shows like Seinfeld would bring in massive chunks of the populace every week, enticing enough people to watch it live. Sure, the market was diverse in scope, and there were a lot of more players in the game, but the market hadn't been destroyed by all these new offerings. DVDs would soon hit the market and give us better picture quality than VHS, but surely we still wanted to record the season premiere of Frasier. But as the 21st century approached, new tech would alter the landscape of entertainment forever. And these changes were some much of the existing market couldn't bounce back from. Enter 1999, CES. That's the Consumer Electronics Show for the uninitiated. A newfangled device makes headlines and promises to shake the broadcast industry to its core. This is the DVR. In function, it's much like a VHS, but in its convenience, it's unparalleled. Instead of putting a tape in, setting a time after checking the TV guide, you would have a TV guide more or less installed on the device. You can browse through all the shows on all the networks and record them straight to a hard drive. It can even automatically skip ads, although that feature would be deemed illegal for the next 10 years or so. More or less, the live television schedule could have no bearing on when you actually watch TV. And unlike VHS tapes, the quality wouldn't degrade over rewinding and pausing and re-recording. This worried networks. This made it so people could feasibly never tune in again live, and on those re-recordings, they wouldn't even see a glimpse of those valuable ads. But early on, the networks managed to make it work. It wasn't as widespread and cheap as VHS was, and many people were content in their ways. The rental market would be affected greatly by new services like Netflix, which would allow you to order DVDs online, which would be delivered over the mail quickly and without late fees. As time went on, DVRs became part of cable packages, and sports options would get viewers to fork out hundreds. TV was still king for now, and those in charge found ways to keep people interested. The only true competition was in its infancy, and its potential wasn't even close to being realized. This was online video, and it had been around to limited success. Poor video quality and bad internet connections, along with the general lack of content, really left it in a novelty category. But then Netflix began streaming video online. At first, it didn't leave the impact you would expect. Granted, it still suffered from bad load times and a really lackluster catalog, but it showed promise. Internet bandwidth really held back a lot of these early initiatives. YouTube was also starting up, but the last thing anybody called it was a TV competitor. Until it was. Now, in the 2010s, everything changes. It all came about pretty quickly. The smartphone let people watch things on the go. As cellular data went from 2G to 3G to 4G, home Wi-Fi was getting better, and TV packages were as expensive as ever. Netflix eventually got more content. Hulu came around, giving more options to the public with a bigger focus on television shows. And YouTube's introduction of practical monetization allowed the birth of full-time creators, and it all happened in just a few years. Now we're in the late 2010s, well, at least when this video was recorded. People that are moving out for the first time aren't giving cable companies hundreds of dollars a month anymore, because, well, why would they? Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, it all became not just supplementary, but the entire television experience. And since the early 2010s, even more arguably outlandish services arose. Twitch was seen as a strange idea that catered to few, and now it's rising to the peak of pop culture. Speaking of, if you want to watch me stream and talk about pointless stuff, check me out on Twitch. But anyway, just go and ask somebody in their 20s or early 30s if they have satellite or cable. I bet you would be hard-pressed to find a single one. The benefits surely don't outweigh the costs. It's not to say television is gone, because obviously people still watch it, but the younger demographics are unwilling to go back to the antiquated methods. DVR, even with auto ad skip, can't compete with Netflix binge watching. Convenience won out. Sports are still primarily on television, and only recently have been going to other sites. Well, it just so happens interest in many conventional sports is down for the younger generation. This could do with the fact it's harder to watch sports without a traditional TV service, or maybe people just have lower attention spans. The reason doesn't matter too much though, since it solidifies the idea that even the most popular aspects of broadcast television are losing popularity. The networks are trying to adapt. Online services with exclusive content, sometimes putting certain sports games on Twitter even. But this will likely not work. Because right now, people are content with Netflix, with Hulu, with YouTube. And content on network television, especially, has seen a considerable drop-off in quality in the past decade or so. Not saying all shows are bad, but certainly much of the talent pool has left this part of the industry. So what's the point here? I don't mean to kick TV while it's down. In fact, it's the opposite. I mean, I'm not saying you should go get Dish and watch The Big Bang Theory, but I think it's important to look back at how all these new video services came around. Even though many of us aren't watching TV like people used to, it doesn't mean that the effects of those times aren't intrinsically linked to today. The entire concept of 30-minute narratives, visual media in the home, even this video you're watching right now, it all comes from the impact of broadcast television. In a way, it hasn't died, but instead transformed. More content by more people and more choices. The pool of talent that makes that show you love on Netflix would have worked for NBC if we were in a different time. It's nice to know that the legacy of television isn't lost, since watching videos is as popular as it's ever been. So what will happen to old television? The big three, the satellite TV providers, will they just disappear? Not for a while. They still have time to learn and change before their core consumer base shifts away. But in the meantime, we can appreciate the modern age of television. More content than ever before, and more accessible than we ever dreamed. The age where we all sit around the TV at 8 o'clock to check out what happens to the gang at Cheers are long gone. But you can still watch it on Netflix. This is Tyler of Knowledge Hub.
No longer watching television on cable, no longer watching television over the air, but watching it on the internet, watching it video stream. Probably that's the way most of you watch television today, and that's called over the top. That's a term we use, an industry term. They're watching it over the top. They're watching it on the internet. Well, that has changed the entire economic dynamic of the television world. It's kind of like what's happened to the record industry. I was selling you albums, and you had to buy the whole album, and maybe there was only one song on that album you wanted. Now, in the music world, you just get that one song and only pay for that one song.
So now there's a big chase going on to how to attract those people into some of these bigger brands, these bigger content offerings, with something that doesn't require them to buy into something that looks like a $100 a month video pack.
Your kids, many of your kids, will never have experienced a household where somebody's paying significant dollars to bring in 500 channels, of which they watch 20. And so you have to create, as Chris said, for advertisers who ultimately are going to fund all of this, a means of attaching themselves or their corporations or their brands to product that is very individual in nature and has to be part of an experience.
So the question I bring to all of you is, so where is the money? Because nobody's making a ton of money on all this. So I'm looking for what is that disruptive technology that can allow me, a regular guy, to go make some money in this industry, because I can't do it as a producer. So I started studying, well, who is making the money here? How many of you are on Facebook? And how many of you would pay to be on Facebook? The problem is that the artist is always going to be poor. And that doesn't just mean painters and dancers and musicians, it means filmmakers.
Think about content discovery, being able to create experiences that get people to try things, get them to recommend things. That's a big focus.
So if you can determine what it is that would be popular and become a curator of that, I think there's endless opportunity.
After you enjoy the video, now I have an individual task for every of you. I want you to open YouTube channel of Najwa Shihab. You can watch Mata Najwa or Narasi TV, which has Najwa Shihab audit. And the second one is Hitam Putih by Deddy Corbuzier. Look for an episode that interests you, so it's up to you which episode that you want to watch. But actually, I want you to describe the episodes that you choose to watch on. And then look for the difference between the two YouTube shows from the content of the show and the strength of the host. So it's the content and the host. You have to mention and actually identify the challenge that will affect the two impression from the two YouTube video. You can examine this challenge from consumers and the editorial teams. What is your impression? What is the challenge in the consumer or the audience, and also in the editorial team when produce the content? Send me the answer through Situs Kuliah. Maximum 2 pages only. So you can make 1 pages, but maximum 2 pages is enough. And don't forget to check the deadline. So I think today material is only this, and I hope you enjoy this video, and we'll see you again. Bye bye.